He divorced her without a second thought, convinced he was choosing freedom. He didn't know he was also choosing to walk away from the two lives growing silently inside her. Months later, when those lives are the only thing that can save her, the hospital makes one desperate call. Only one person on earth can help: the man who left. Some doors, once closed, locked themselves from the inside. He had been rehearsing this moment for weeks. Ethan Cole sat at the courtroom table, his hands folded neatly in front of him, jaw set, eyes fixed on the papers spread across the polished wood. Around him, the building hummed with the quiet, indifferent machinery of legal endings. A clerk typed somewhere down the hall. A ceiling fan turned overhead. A child laughed outside a window, far away. Across the table, Sarah didn't look at him. She hadn't looked at him once since they sat down. Her hands were in her lap, hidden, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful stillness of someone trying very hard not to fall apart in a public place. She was wearing the blue dress, the one she wore the first time they had dinner together, the one she used to say was her armor. He wondered if she had chosen it on purpose today, if she needed armor against him now. The lawyer, a tired man named Greaves, with reading glasses on a chain and a face shaped by too many of these rooms, slid the final page across to her. She picked up the pen. Her hand trembled. Ethan saw it, saw the way she had to brace her wrist with her other hand, saw the small, controlled breath she took before pressing the pen to paper, saw her write her name in letters that started steady and wavered at the end. Like she had used up everything she had just to begin, she slid the papers to him without a word. He picked up the pen, signed quickly, decisively. Like a man who had made his decision and was not going to let sentiment be the thing that undid it. That was what Michael had told him. Be decisive. Do not hesitate. Hesitation is just guilt dressed up as conscience. The ink dried. It was over. She stood before he could speak. The chair scraped back and she gathered her bag with hands that did not quite cooperate, fingers fumbling with the strap, and for one moment he almost said something, almost reached out, almost told her that he was sorry, that maybe they could have done this differently, that maybe he was wrong. Instead, he said nothing. She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, she said. Not angry, not bitter, just exhausted, the voice of someone who had already grieved this and now only wanted it to be finished. Then she walked out. He sat there a long time, staring at the doorway after she left, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. The lawyer cleared his throat and said something about processing times and final copies. Ethan did not hear any of it. He gathered the papers and left through a different exit. Outside, the sky was overcast, the kind of gray that pressed down without committing to rain. He sat in his car in the parking lot and looked at his own reflection in the rearview mirror. 41 years old, good health, good prospects, a business that was finally beginning to move in the direction Michael had been promising for over a year. Free, his phone buzzed. Michael. Done? The message said. He typed back, done, 3 dots. Then, good, that's the first right decision you've made in a long time. Dinner tonight, we celebrate. Ethan set the phone face down on the passenger seat. He sat there in the gray light and waited to feel something that resembled relief. It did not come. What came instead was quieter and heavier and harder to name. The memory of her hand trembling over that paper. The way she had worn her armor today. The way she had said goodbye like someone who had already accepted a loss they never asked for. He started the engine, drove away, told himself it was the right decision all the way across the city, and did not believe a single word of it. The body knows the truth before the mind is brave enough to hear it. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that smelled of old carpet and someone else's cooking. Sarah moved in with 3 boxes and a suitcase. She unpacked slowly over several days, not because she had so much to arrange, but because putting things on shelves felt like surrender, like agreeing to this life, like admitting that this small, bare room with its cracked ceiling and rattling pipes was now the sum total of everything she had left. She put her books by the window, her 2 good plates in the cabinet, her coat on a hook by the door. Everything fit. That was the worst part. Her entire life fit. She found work answering phones at a medical billing office. Small desk, beige wall, a supervisor named Helen who smiled too wide and asked too many questions about Sarah's personal life in the first week, then stopped asking entirely when Sarah made it clear she was not going to offer anything. The days moved like water, slow and directionless. The nausea started in the third week. She told herself it was stress, the body processing grief. She had read about that, how heartbreak had a physical weight, how loss could make you sick in ways that look like illness, but were really just sorrow wearing a different coat. But the nausea did not behave like grief. It came in waves, predictable and relentless. Morning mostly, but sometimes at night. She started keeping crackers on the nightstand, started avoiding certain smells, the coffee she used to love, the candle she had burned every evening for years, the detergent she had always used. She changed the detergent. That helped for 3 days. Then nothing helped. Her body was changing in ways she noticed and tried not to think about. A tenderness in her chest that had not been there before. A fullness, a softness, a subtle rearranging of herself that did not match the weight she was losing everywhere else. She was eating less. She looked thinner in the face, sharper around the collar. But there was something else happening somewhere deeper. She was afraid to name it. If she named it, it became real. One evening she stood in the bathroom for a long time, staring at the woman in the mirror. The fluorescent light was too bright and too honest. Her face was pale. Her eyes were ringed with shadow. Her hair was held up with a clip she had not replaced in 3 weeks. She looked like someone surviving. Not living, surviving. She pressed her hands to her stomach, felt the small, undeniable curve. Not stress, not grief. Something else entirely. She bought the test at a pharmacy 3 blocks from her apartment at 11 o'clock at night, wearing sunglasses she did not need, and a scarf pulled up around her chin like that would make her invisible. She paid cash, walked home fast, sat on the bathroom floor with the door locked even though she was alone, had been alone for weeks, would be alone for the foreseeable future. She already knew the answer before the second line appeared. Her body had been telling her for weeks. She had just been too afraid to listen. She sat on the bathroom floor for a long time after, knees drawn up to her chest, back against the tub, the test lying on the tile in front of her. The building creaked around her. Someone upstairs walked back and forth. A siren passed outside and faded. She thought about calling someone, her sister in Portland, who she had not spoken to in 8 months, her mother who would cry and then say something unhelpful. Ethan. No, not Ethan. He had made his choice, had made it clearly and without apology, and had walked out of that courtroom like a man putting down something heavy he had been carrying too long. Like she had been the weight, like their life together had been the thing slowing him down. She would not call him. She would not tell him. She pressed her hand to her stomach in the cold bathroom light and made a promise she did not yet know how she would keep. Some revelations do not arrive gently. They arrive like a hand pressing on a bruise. The doctor's office was on the second floor of a medical building that shared a parking lot with a coffee shop and a dry cleaner. Sarah had put off coming for 2 weeks after the test. There was always a reason to wait. Work, exhaustion, the simple, desperate hope that if she did not confirm it out loud, she could keep existing in the space between knowing and not knowing just a little longer. But the dizziness had gotten worse. And one morning she had stood up too fast from her desk, and the room had tilted so sharply she had to grab the edge of the counter with both hands and wait for the world to settle itself back into something she recognized. She called and made the appointment that afternoon. The waiting room had beige chairs and a wall-mounted television playing a cooking show with the volume too low to hear. She sat with a clipboard in her lap and filled out the intake forms, answering questions about allergies and insurance and family history, and leaving the line for emergency contact blank. Dr. Vance was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses she wore on the top of her head until she needed them. She had the manner of someone who had seen most things twice and stopped being surprised long ago. She reviewed Sarah's answers, asked about the nausea, the the fatigue, the dizziness. When did your last period occur? Sarah tried to think. The past few months were a blur of packing boxes in courthouse hallways and nights spent staring at a ceiling that belonged to someone else now. She could not remember. I'm not sure, she said. Dr. Vance did not raise an eyebrow, just nodded and reached for the ultrasound equipment with the practiced ease of someone who already knew what she was looking for. The gel was cold. Sarah turned her face toward the wall. She heard the machine hum, heard Dr. Vance make a small sound, not alarmed, not dramatic, just a small intake of breath that meant something had shifted. Sarah. A pause. I need you to look at this. She turned. The screen showed a darkness filled with static, and in that darkness, two shapes, small, curved, impossibly fragile looking, and beating. Both of them beating. Two separate rhythms, slightly offset, like two people walking, almost but not quite in step. You're carrying twins, Dr. Vance said. The word did not land right away. Sarah stared at the screen, at the two small pulses flickering in the dark. Her mind moved very slowly, like it was wading through something thick. Twins, she repeated. Based on the measurements, I would estimate you're between 13 and 15 weeks, which means the conception was... Before the divorce was finalized, Sarah said quietly. Before he left. Yes. The silence that followed was complete. Sarah became aware of the gel cold on her skin, the hum of the machine, the slight roughness of the paper gown against her arms, the two pulses on the screen, steady and indifferent to the way the world had just restructured itself around them. Two lives, growing inside her while Ethan celebrated his freedom. While she moved into a tiny apartment and answered phones at a billing office and told herself every morning that she was fine, that she was surviving, that she did not need him. She had been carrying them the whole time. They had been there through every sleepless night and every wave of nausea and every moment she had stood in that bathroom mirror trying to convince herself the softness in her body was grief and not life. They had been there. Are they healthy? Her voice broke. She tried again. Are they strong? Strong heartbeats, good positioning? Dr. Vance's voice was careful now, measured. But Sarah, your iron levels are very low. You're borderline anemic. You haven't been eating enough. Twin pregnancies are already considered high risk. She paused. Is there someone who can support you through this? Family? A partner? Sarah looked back at the screen, at the two small beings who had not asked to be created, who did not know what they were coming into, whose father had signed papers and driven away and was probably at a business dinner right now, toasting to his future, unaware that his future had two heartbeats and was growing inside a woman he had decided was not worth staying for. I have myself, Sarah said. Dr. Vance looked at her for a long moment. Then you're going to have to be very strong, she said, for all three of you. Sarah walked out into the afternoon light with a folder of prenatal instructions and 3 prescription slips, and the image of 2 pulses still burned into the back of her eyes. She sat in her car for a while without starting the engine. Then she put her hand on her stomach, on the small, stubborn fact of what was growing there, and said to no one, to both of them, to herself, I won't tell him. He chose to go. These are mine now. I'll keep you safe. I promise I'll keep you safe. She started the engine and drove back to the apartment that had become her life. Back to the quiet and the crackers on the nightstand, and the beige walls, and the woman in the mirror who was going to have to figure out how to survive this. Alone. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Sometimes it's just getting dressed and showing up anyway. She quit the billing office at 14 weeks. Helen had begun to notice. The frequent trips to the restroom, the crackers Sarah kept in her desk drawer, the way she sometimes had to pause mid-sentence during a call and press one hand flat against her desk until a wave of nausea passed. Helen had not said anything directly, but Sarah had caught her watching twice, and twice was enough. She did not want the conversations, the questions, the well-meaning intrusion of people who thought a pregnancy was an invitation to weigh in on your life. She found remote work through an agency that placed contractors with medical offices and legal firms, answering phones, scheduling, data entry, Work she could do in the hours her body cooperated, which were fewer now than before. The pay was less, but her expenses were low, and she had learned to want less. She bought maternity clothes from a second-hand shop 3 blocks from her apartment. Soft things, elastic waistbands, fabrics that stretched without complaint. They smelled faintly of someone else's pregnancy, someone else's story, and Sarah would wash them 3 times and still sometimes catch that ghost of a scent and wonder about the woman who had worn them before. Whether her story had turned out better, whether anyone had been with her. The babies moved for the first time on a Thursday afternoon in May. She was sitting at her desk working through a backlog of appointment confirmations when she felt it. A flutter, faint and unmistakable, like something knocking from the inside, like 2 small fists testing the walls of a world they were still learning to navigate. She stopped typing. Her hands went to her stomach without permission, and she sat there in her small apartment, at her second-hand desk, in the quiet afternoon light, while both of them moved. And the tears came so suddenly she did not have time to prepare for them. She cried for a long time. Not from sadness exactly, not from grief, from something bigger and harder to name, from the strangeness of feeling 2 lives inside her own, from the loneliness of having no one to tell, from the weight of carrying this joy and terror by herself while the world moved on outside her window, indifferent and bright. "I feel you," she whispered. "I know you're there." She had given them names by then, had given them names the week after the ultrasound, in the bathroom at 2 in the morning when she could not sleep and needed them to be real people rather than an abstraction. Noah and Eli. Simple names. Names that worked in either order. Names that sounded like they could belong to boys who would grow up stubborn and curious and full of something she could not define yet, but wanted for them. She talked to them sometimes, in the evenings when the work was done and the apartment was quiet. She would read aloud from whatever she was reading. She would describe things she passed on her walk to the pharmacy or the grocery store. She would tell them about the park 2 streets over where the maple trees were beginning to turn. She never talked about Ethan. She saw him once in October. She was coming out of the pharmacy with a bag of prenatal vitamins and a bottle of iron supplements when she saw him across the street. He was with Michael, both of them in expensive coats. Both of them moving with the easy confidence of men who had places to be and the means to get there. Ethan was laughing at something Michael had said, his head thrown back, his shoulders loose. He looked well. He looked free. She pressed herself against the pharmacy wall, her coat pulled tight around her body, even though she was already showing in ways no coat could fully hide. And she watched him walk away down the street without once glancing in her direction. He did not see her. She stood there until they turned the corner. Until the space where he had been was just sidewalk and strangers again. Then she walked home. Did not cry that time. Just walked, one hand on her stomach, listening to the city. At home, she sat on her bed and said to both of them, "You have a father, but he doesn't know about you, and that's not your fault, and it's not mine either. And we're going to be okay. We are going to be more than okay." She almost believed it. She was getting better at almost believing it. There is a limit to what one person can carry. The body keeps count even when the mind refuses to. The doctor at her 28-week appointment did not hide her concern. Dr. Vance reviewed the blood work with the expression of someone adding numbers that were not adding up the way she wanted. She flipped between pages, read something twice, looked at Sarah over the top of her reading glasses. "Your hemoglobin is dangerously low, lower than it was at your last visit, which means the supplements aren't compensating for what your body is losing. The twins are taking what they need, Sarah, but there's not enough left for you. I'm taking the supplements every day and not absorbing them properly, which can happen in high-stress conditions." She paused. "Are you sleeping?" "Some." "Eating?" Sarah did not answer. "You need someone with you," Dr. Vance said. "I've said this before. This is a high-risk pregnancy, and you are a single person living alone with no support structure. If something happens, nothing is going to happen." "Sarah." "I'm fine. I'll be fine." Dr. Vance gave her new prescriptions, stronger supplements, a dietary sheet, an order for weekly monitoring. Sarah took everything and thanked her and left, and stopped at the pharmacy and sat in the car for 15 minutes before she had the energy to drive. The last 6 weeks were brutal. Her back ached constantly, a grinding, burning pain that no position relieved. She could not sleep more than 2 hours at a time before one of them pressed against something and woke her. Her hands shook now, a small tremor that made typing difficult, that made her drop things. A glass, her phone, a fork off the kitchen table that clattered to the floor and stayed there for almost an hour before she found the energy to pick it up. She wore slip-on shoes because bending to tie laces had become impossible. She took her calls sitting down with her feet elevated because standing for more than 20 minutes made her head swim. She ate when she remembered to, which was less often than she should have. One evening, she was trying to get up from the couch to reach the phone charger she had left on the counter. Simple. 12 feet. She stood, made it 4 steps, and then the room folded. Not quite fainting. Something close to it. A darkening at the edges. A sudden weakness in her legs that sent her back to the couch, her heart hammering. Her vision clearing slowly like fog lifting. She sat there for a long time afterward. She thought about calling someone. She thought about it and did not do it. The night it happened was in the middle of November. She had been having contractions through the evening, irregular ones, the kind the books described as practice contractions, and she had told herself that was all they were. Practice, her body rehearsing for something that was still weeks away. But by 9 o'clock, they were coming closer together. By 10, they were 3 minutes apart. She tried to reach her phone, had left it on the coffee table. She stretched for it and a contraction hit, worse than any of the others, a vice closing around her middle and refusing to let go, and her hand knocked the phone off the edge. She heard it hit the floor, heard it skitter under the couch. She tried to breathe, tried to think. She got onto her knees and reached under the couch, her fingers searching in the dark, finding dust in the edge of a book and nothing else. Another contraction. She pressed her forehead to the floor and waited for it to pass, and it did not pass. It built, and the pain was like nothing she had prepared for, like something tearing open, like her body breaking the promises she had made to herself about being fine, about managing, about not needing anyone. "Help," she said to the empty room. "Someone help me." But the room was empty, and the walls were thick. And Noah and Eli were coming into the world 6 weeks early because their mother had run out of enough to give. She did not know how long she was on the floor before the neighbor's dog started barking. The terrier 2 doors down, who barked at deliveries and thunder, and apparently at the muffled sounds of a woman in distress through a shared wall. The neighbor heard something, knocked, called through the door, then called for an ambulance. By the time the paramedics came through the door, Sarah was barely conscious, her body in full labor, her blood pressure dropping in ways the monitors would later describe as critical. She heard voices above her, hands, movement, the cold air of the hallway. She thought, "I should have called someone. I should have let someone help me. I was so determined to do this alone that I almost..." Then the sirens in the dark and nothing. Some things that look like coincidence are just love finding its way back. City General Hospital at 11:30 on a Tuesday night moved like controlled emergency. Dr. Rena Ayala had been on shift for 9 hours and had 3 hours left, and was running on coffee and the particular concentrated focus that good doctors develop in their second decade of practice. She stood in the delivery room and worked without hesitation, delivering 2 babies who came too early and too quiet, their skin too pale, their first moments measured in the desperate efficiency of the NICU team waiting to receive them. Baby A emerged at 11:47. No cry. He was taken immediately to the warming table, where Nurse Rodriguez began the practice sequence of interventions for premature infants who had not yet decided to commit to living. Baby B followed at 11:49. Also quiet. Also taken. And on the table, their mother bled. The blood pressure numbers dropped in increments that meant very little time. The transfusion orders had already been called, the blood type flagged, the hospital blood bank checked and rechecked, and the answer was the same each time. A B negative. One of the rarest types in the population. Less than 1%. The regional bank had been depleted by a multi-vehicle accident 2 hours earlier. Every unit available had gone to trauma patients still in surgery down the hall. There was nothing left. Expand the search, Dr. Ayala said without looking up from her work, her hands steady, her voice flat with focus. Every hospital within 50 miles, every registered donor in the system. At the nurses' station, charge nurse Petra ran the searches with the same quiet urgency. Her screen filled with results and none of them were what she needed. She called 3 hospitals, got the same answer each time. The intake file for the woman on the table was thin. No family listed, no emergency contacts, no next of kin. Just a woman who had come in through the emergency entrance alone, a woman who had apparently been alone for months. A woman whose entire paper trail inside this hospital said, no one. Except. Petra scrolled back through the system. The woman had been a patient here once before, 2 years ago, a different record entry. Same last name, different prefix. Before, when she was still married. There's an old emergency contact, Petra said, from a previous record. It's marked outdated. There's a note here that says divorced. What's the blood type on file for the contact? Petra checked. A B negative. The room was quiet for 1 second. Call him, Dr. Ayala said. Doctor, the note says divorced. If the relationship has been legally terminated, I don't care about the legal status. I care about 2 infants and a woman with a BP of 60/30. Call the number. Petra called. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She called again. Across the city in a restaurant with low lighting and a menu that did not list prices, Ethan Cole sat across from Michael and watched his phone vibrate against the tablecloth. Unknown number. He turned it face down. You should get that, Michael said, nodding at the phone. It's nothing. Unknown number. The phone went still. Then it buzzed again. Petra called 3 times in 4 minutes. On the 3rd call, Ethan picked up. Hello? Is this Ethan Cole? Yes, who is this? This is Petra from City General Hospital. Your name is listed as emergency contact for Sarah Cole. Mr. Cole, I need you to listen carefully. Sarah is in critical condition following an emergency delivery. She has AB negative blood type and we have no matching supply. Without a transfusion, she will not survive the next hour. Your file shows you are also AB negative. Are you able to come in? Ethan heard the words. He heard them one at a time, like they were arriving slowly, 1 letter at a time. Sarah, emergency delivery. AB negative, will not survive. Delivery, he said. Yes, sir. She delivered twins tonight. They are premature and in the NICU, but right now the immediate concern is twins. Mr. Cole, I need to know. Are you coming? The restaurant noise seemed very far away suddenly. Michael saying something. The clink of glasses. The normal, unaware world continuing around a man standing at its edge. Give me the address, he said. I'm leaving now. He was already standing. He was already gone. The fastest you will ever move is toward the person you realize you should never have left. The city at night was never truly dark. Ethan moved through it too fast, taking corners he knew by reflex, getting onto the highway and off again with a muscle memory that did not require his conscious mind. His conscious mind was doing other things. His conscious mind was doing the mathematics of the past several months and arriving at a sum that made him feel physically ill. She had been pregnant when he left. She had been pregnant when he sat across from her in that courtroom and signed his name to the end of their marriage and felt something he had tried to call relief. She had been pregnant when she told him she hoped he found what he was looking for and walked out the door with her armor dress in her trembling hands. She had known. She must have found out after the divorce was already finalized, after he had made it impossibly clear that their life together was the thing holding him back. And she had decided not to tell him. Of course she had decided not to tell him. What else would she have decided? He had left. He had said the words and signed the papers and walked away. What was she supposed to do? Call him up and say, by the way, I am carrying your children. Please reconsider? He had made that impossible. He had made himself someone she could not call. His hands gripped the steering wheel and he drove faster. Michael had called twice already. He had let it go to voicemail both times. There were no words for this. There was no way to explain to a man who had spent a year telling him that freedom was the goal, that ambition required sacrifice, that a good marriage gone quiet was no reason to stay. There was no way to tell him that sitting in that restaurant he had everything he needed and had not known it. That leaving had been the worst thing he had ever done. He hit a red light and stopped, hands still white-knuckled on the wheel, and thought about her carrying them alone. Making appointments alone, feeling them move for the first time alone, scared and sick and carrying the weight of something that had been his as much as hers, alone, because he had made it impossible to do anything else. The light turned green. He drove. The hospital came into view from 3 blocks away, a massive lit structure against the dark sky, all windows and emergency lights, and the particular brightness of a building that never slept. He pulled into the emergency bay badly, tires scraping the curb, and got out before the car had fully stopped. Through the automatic doors, to the desk. Ethan Cole, I got a call. He stopped. What was she? Ex-wife. The woman he had left. The mother of his children. Sarah Cole. She needs blood, a B negative. I'm a match. The nurse's expression sharpened immediately. She was already on her feet. Come with me. He followed her through double doors, down a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and urgency, past rooms with closed curtains, past a nurse's station, past everything that was not the room at the end of the corridor where they were taking him. Is she? The doctors are working, the nurse said. The careful non-answer of someone who knows the real answer is too heavy to carry in a hallway. He was taken to a small side room, a donor chair, equipment ready and waiting as if they had been expecting exactly him, as if the whole night had been building toward this specific moment. He sat. Petra came in, the one who had called him. She was steady and efficient and looked at him with the frank, assessing gaze of someone who had made a judgment call and was still waiting to see if it would pay off. Roll up your sleeve, she said. He did. She found the vein. The needle was a small, clean pain. How much can you take? He asked. As much as you can safely give. Take it, he said. Take whatever you need. He watched his blood move through the tube, red and continuous. A piece of himself traveling toward her, through plastic tubing, across the floor, out the door, down the hall, into a room he could not see. The twins, he thought. He did not know their names, did not know anything about them, did not know if they were boys or girls or what they looked like or whether they were frightened of being born into a world this complicated. He was a father. He had been a father without knowing it. His children had been breathing for less than an hour, and he had already missed the entire beginning of their lives. Petra checked his blood pressure, made a note, adjusted the line. The babies, he said. Are they premature, but breathing? She did not look up from her monitoring. They're fighters, apparently. Took a while, but they got there. He closed his eyes. Thank you, he thought, to no one he could name, to whatever had made them stubborn enough to breathe, to whatever had kept them here. The machine beeped. Donation complete. Petra removed the needle with the same brisk efficiency she had done everything else. Taped the gauze down, looked at him. Keep pressure on it. You might feel dizzy when you stand. I need to see her. Not yet. Let the transfusion work first, then I'll take you. She picked up the blood bag, headed for the door. Paused with her hand on the frame, looked back at him over her shoulder. For what it's worth, you got here in time. That matters. She left. Ethan sat alone in the donation room with gauze pressed to his arm and his heart beating too hard and the knowledge settling over him like weather. He had gotten here in time, but he had spent months being somewhere else entirely. In hospitals, time moves differently. Every minute is the whole world. Dr. Ayala found him in the hallway outside the NICU at midnight. He had been standing at the glass for 20 minutes, watching through it. He had been told he could go in, that the nurses would show him how to use the hand wash station, that he was allowed to touch them through the portholes in the incubators. But he had not been able to make himself move. Not yet. He stood at the glass and looked at the two small shapes under the warming lights and tried to understand what he was looking at. His sons. The doctor confirmed this quietly, standing beside him. Twin boys, she said, born at 34 weeks, small but better than we feared. Their lungs are working, their heart rates are stable. The next 48 hours matter most, but the team here is good, and those boys, she paused, they have their mother's stubbornness. That's not nothing. Ethan looked at them through the glass. They were so small. He had held newborns before, cousins' children, friends' babies. He knew what newborns looked like, but he had not been prepared for this. For the particular, impossible smallness of children born too early, their skin thin as paper, their features compressed and fierce, their whole bodies the size of something you could hold in one hand. His hands. Their hands. Both of them. She doesn't know I'm here, he said. No. She doesn't know I gave blood. Not yet. He nodded. I don't want that to be why she... He stopped, started again. I don't want her to feel like she owes me anything. I don't want that to be the reason she lets me near them. Dr. Ayala was quiet for a moment. She had the particular stillness of someone who had learned to let silences mean something. Mr. Cole, she said finally, Sarah carried those boys for 34 weeks, alone. She went to every appointment alone. She managed a high-risk pregnancy alone. She was on the floor of her apartment in labor for over an hour before anyone found her. A pause. Whatever happens next between you and her is your business. But I want you to understand what she went through. I want you to know that when you left someone who was building the courage to be completely alone, and that takes more than most people have. He did not say anything. What was there to say? She's stable, Dr. Ayala continued. The transfusion worked. She'll sleep for several hours. When she wakes up, she's going to have questions about how she survived, about why you're here, about what you want. She looked at him. Have good answers ready. She left. He stayed at the glass. Eventually, a nurse came and opened the NICU door and offered to show him where the boys were. He followed her to the two incubators side by side, labeled with temporary tags, Baby A, Baby B, clinical labels for children who deserved names he did not know yet. He looked at Baby A, at the miniature perfection of a face still learning to exist, at the way the small chest rose and fell with each breath, each one a small victory, each one proof of something surviving against the odds. He reached through the port, touched the tiny hand. The fingers wrapped around his, reflexive, instinctive, a grip so strong it seemed impossible from something so small. His throat closed. He stood there and let his son hold his finger and tried to be equal to it, to be equal to the weight of this moment, to the knowledge that he had almost never had this. That 3 hours ago he had not known this existed. That Sarah had known for 7 months and carried it alone. He moved to Baby B, the same procedure, the same grip, the same impossible strength in those miniature fingers. Hey, he whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. I'm here. I'm late. I'm very, very late, but I'm here. The machine beeped its steady rhythm. The NICU hummed around him. He stayed until a nurse gently told him he should eat something, should rest, that the boys would still be here, that they were not going anywhere. He went to the cafeteria, bought coffee he did not drink, went back, sat in the chair outside Sarah's room, the door closed, the building settling into its late-night quiet around him. And he waited for the only thing that mattered now, for her to wake up, for her to open her eyes, For the moment when he would have to look at the woman he had left and find the words for what he had done and what he wanted now and why he had no right to ask for it, but was going to ask anyway, because some mistakes can only be fixed by the person who made them showing up and refusing to leave. The hardest conversations are the ones where both people are telling the truth. She woke to gray light, in the smell of antiseptic, in the soft, rhythmic beeping of machines that were keeping count of things her body was doing without her direction. Her chest felt hollow. Her arms ached. She turned her head and found him. Ethan was asleep in the chair by the window, his head against the wall, his clothes creased from a night he had not planned to spend here. There were marks on his arm from a needle. There were shadows under his eyes that had not been there the last time she had seen him. In that courtroom, signing his name to the end of things. She stared at him for a long time before she said his name. Ethan. He woke immediately, like he had been waiting for it. His eyes found hers and something moved across his face that she did not have a name for. Relief and guilt tangled together into something she was not ready to interpret. "You're awake," he said. His voice was rough from the night. "What are you doing here?" He did not answer right away. He leaned forward, picked up the water cup from the tray beside her, offered the straw with hands that were not quite steady. She drank. She was desperately thirsty. "The hospital called me," he said. "I was still listed as your emergency contact. I didn't know you hadn't changed it." She absorbed that. Thought about the intake forms she had filled out in the waiting room months ago when she had first come to this hospital, back when they were still married and she had put his name down as a matter of course and then forgotten. The way you forget to update the small administrative details of a life after it breaks apart. "The babies," she said. "They're in the NICU, both breathing. The doctor said they're stable. Small, but stable." He paused. "Twin boys." She pressed her hand to her stomach, to the absence where they had been. And grief came for a moment, not loss exactly, but adjustment, the body remembering what it had been carrying and finding the space empty now. "Noah and Eli," she said. He repeated the names quietly, like he was learning something. "The needle marks on your arm," she said. He looked down. "They needed AB negative blood. There was none in the hospital. You were still in the system as a match." He met her eyes. "I gave blood. They used it for the transfusion." She held his gaze and tried to find the right feeling for that information. Gratitude, resentment, something complicated that was neither of those things. "You saved my life," she said. "You should not have needed saving. If I had been—" He stopped. The sentence did not have a good ending. "I'm sorry, Sarah." She looked at the window. Rain tracked slowly down the glass outside. A gray morning. The world washed in quiet. "Don't," she said. "I need to say it. I've been saying things to you in my head for months. Things I needed to say. Whole speeches. Very thorough." Her voice was steadier than she expected. "But right now I just had my sons, and I almost didn't survive it. And I'm not ready for the conversation about what you should have done differently." He nodded, said nothing. The machines beeped, steady and patient. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked after a long quiet. She turned back to look at him. "Because you left. Because you made it very clear you didn't want the life we were building. Because I was not going to use a pregnancy to hold on to a man who had decided I wasn't worth staying for." She kept her voice even. "Just facts. I wasn't going to let you stay out of obligation, Ethan. I wasn't going to do that to any of us." He absorbed that. "I was wrong," he said, "to leave. I was wrong about what I wanted. I was wrong about what mattered. I spent 9 months learning it slowly, and I came here tonight and I learned it completely." He leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees, his eyes on the floor. "I don't expect anything. I don't expect you to forgive me or to let me back in or to pretend it didn't happen the way it did. But I need you to know that I am not going to disappear. I'm not going to let those boys grow up without a father if there is any chance at all that you'll let me be one." Sarah was quiet for a long time. Outside the window, the rain had softened. "They're your sons," she said finally. "I'm not going to take that from them, or from you. Whatever I feel about the rest of it, they deserve to know their father." He let out a breath that seemed to have been held for a very long time. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Earn it." She turned to look at him, fully now, steadily. The gaze of a woman who had spent 9 months alone and was not going to pretend otherwise. Earn every minute of it. Show up. Keep showing up. Not because you feel guilty, not because I almost died, because you actually want to be their father. "I do," he said. Simply, without qualification. She held his gaze a moment longer, then looked back at the window. "Tell the nurse I want to see them," she said. "Noah and Eli. Tell them I want to see my sons." He stood, went to the door, paused with his hand on the frame in the same spot she had paused months ago in a courtroom before she had said something kind to a man who did not deserve it. "Sarah." She looked at him. "I'm glad you're alive," he said. "That's not about the boys. That's just about you. I'm glad you're still here." She did not say anything, but something in her expression, something very small and very guarded, shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But something. He went to get the nurse, and she lay in the gray morning light and let herself feel all of it. The relief of being alive. The ache of the empty space where they had been. The complicated, unresolved, ongoing weight of the man who had just told her the truth from the doorway. And underneath all of it, steady and certain as the machines that kept counting, the knowledge that her sons were breathing. That Noah and Eli were breathing. That they had made it. That she had made it. That they were all, against every reasonable expectation, still here. Some stories don't end. They just find the shape they were always supposed to take. They let her see them at 9 in the morning. A nurse named Rodriguez, who had been with them from the first moments and had the particular warmth of someone who takes their job personally, wheeled Sarah's chair down the hall to the NICU and positioned her beside the 2 incubators and stepped back and gave them the room she knew they needed. Sarah looked at her sons for the first time. Noah was in the left incubator. He had a full head of dark hair, which Rodriguez said was unusual for a baby this early, and which he had apparently arrived with, as if he had always intended to. His face was a collection of miniature features, a nose that turned up slightly at the end, a mouth that pursed in sleep, hands that were already making small, fierce fists. Eli was in the right incubator, a little larger than his brother, a little smoother faced, already differentiated in some way she could not name yet, but would learn. His hands were open. His breathing was the most even of the 2. She sat between them and put one hand through each port and touched them both at the same time. Neither of them woke, but she felt them, their warmth, the slight rise and fall of their breathing. The realness of them after months of feeling them only from the inside. "Hey," she said softly, "it's me. I'm here. I'm sorry you had to come so early. I'm sorry it was so hard." Her voice cracked. She let it. "You're going to be okay. Both of you. We're going to be okay." Ethan stood outside the NICU glass. He had understood, without being told, that this was her moment. That she had carried them alone for 9 months, and the first sight of them, the first real contact, belonged to her. He had waited in the hallway and watched through the window and tried not to feel like a stranger, which was what he was, what he had made himself. But then Sarah had looked up from Noah's incubator and threw the glass at him. Just looked, and then she had nodded once, small and not quite warm, but not unwelcoming. And he had understood that as the invitation it was. He washed his hands at the station, came in quietly. Rodriguez directed him to the ports. He reached through to Noah first, felt the hand grip his finger the same way it had the night before, that same astonishing strength, that same reflex that said, "I am here, I intend to stay here." Then Eli, the same. He and Sarah sat on opposite sides of the 2 incubators in the quiet hum of the NICU, each connected by one hand to one of their sons, not speaking. The machines kept count. The nurses moved at the edges of the room. The morning light came through the high windows and made everything look almost gentle. They stayed like that for a long time. The days that followed were measured in NICU milestones. Weight gained, oxygen levels stable, feeding, eyes open and tracking, responses to voices, each small increment of victory that felt enormous. Sarah was discharged after 4 days, but she spent every possible hour at the hospital. Ethan came every day too. They were careful with each other, polite in the way of people navigating something fragile, something that could become something, or could not, depending on choices neither of them had made yet. He brought food she did not have to think about, coffee, things she could eat with one hand while the other was in an incubator port. She told him the names and their origins, small things she had decided alone, the reasoning, the weight of them. He listened without offering opinions he had not earned the right to offer. He said he was stepping back from the business ventures Michael had been building, said he wanted to be available, said he understood if she did not want him in her home, in her daily life, but that he wanted to be near the boys as much as she would allow. She said she would allow a great deal for their sake. She did not say yet what she would allow for her own. 3 weeks after they were born, Noah and Eli came home. Sarah's apartment was too small. That was obvious. She had known it would be obvious and had been bracing for the conversation about logistics, about space, about how to do this practically. Ethan did not offer to move in. He understood that was not a door that was open yet. Maybe never, maybe eventually, but not yet. Instead, he found an apartment in the same building, 2 floors down, close enough to be there in minutes, far enough to be a separate life. Sarah had let him show her the lease before he signed it. He had waited for her approval, not as a formality, but as a real question. She had nodded. It was not forgiveness. It was not a reconciliation. It was the beginning of something she did not have a name for yet, something that might be built slowly from the specific materials of 2 people who had hurt each other and were trying, for the sake of 2 small lives, to become something better. On the first night the boys came home, Sarah sat in the rocking chair she had bought from the second-hand shop on the corner, one son in each arm, their combined weight small and warm and impossibly real against her chest, and she looked out the window at the city going about its business below. She thought about everything it had taken to get here. The divorce, the apartment, the months alone, the nausea and the fear and the night on the floor, the ambulance and the blood type and the phone call to a man who had answered on the 3rd ring and crossed the city through the rain. She thought about what it cost to survive and what it cost to forgive, and whether those were different things or the same. A knock at the door. Soft, tentative. She already knew who it was. "Come in," she said. Ethan opened the door, saw her in the rocking chair with both boys, stopped in the doorway with the expression of someone who keeps expecting the world to make less sense than it does and keeps being surprised when it makes more. "I brought food," he said, "and I can leave if you—" "You can stay," she said, "for a little while." He set the food on the counter, came and crouched down beside the chair, at the level of the boys, so they were face to face with their father, or would be, when they were ready to open their eyes fully and take in the world that had waited for them. He touched Noah's cheek with one careful finger. Noah scrunched his face and settled deeper against Sarah's arm. Ethan smiled, the real kind, the kind that did not know it was happening. "Hey there," he said quietly. "It's okay. I'm not going anywhere." Sarah looked at him over the tops of their sons' heads. She did not say anything, but she did not look away. Outside the window, the city moved through its evening, indifferent and bright, full of lives unaware of this particular room and the particular, complicated, unfinished thing being built inside it. Noah and Eli slept. The world turned. And in a small apartment on the 4th floor of a building that had once smelled only of old carpet and endings, 3 people who had come so close to losing each other breathed together in the quiet. And something that had been broken began, slowly and without ceremony, to find the shape of what it might become.